If sports do nothing for you, this video might explain your entire life. Because science says your brain is literally wired in another way. Most folks are yelling at their TVs, painting their faces, and letting their whole mood crash. Because 11 guys they've never met just lost a game. But there's also a big group of people who couldn't care less. And brain science says their minds might actually be built differently. Stick with me, because what you're about to hear may change how you look at the sports nuts in your life. Here's the part nobody really says out loud. People who don't fixate on sports often have what psychologists call weaker tribal instincts. Their sense of who they are isn't wrapped up in belonging to a big group. They lean more toward standing on their own. They're more likely to think, I don't need to be part of a crowd to feel whole. And there's research to back that up. A study from 2018 found that people who weren't into sports showed much less us versus them thinking. In plain words, they don't automatically dislike the other side just because it's the other side. But it gets even stranger, because what goes on inside the brain of a hardcore fan during a game is honestly a little worrying. Think about that feeling. Right before you open a gift, that buzz of waiting, that's dopamine, lighting up your brain. Sports fans get the same rush while they're watching on every play, every drive, over and over again. Little hits of waiting and reward. It can turn into an addiction. Brain scans show that watching your team lights up the same reward areas as gambling and other highly gripping habits. And here's the real hook. Not knowing how it will end is what makes it so strong. You have no idea if your team will win. That uncertainty keeps the dopamine coming. It's called intermittent reinforcement, and it's the most addictive reward pattern. Psychologists know, and it's the same trick. Slot machines use, the way it works, is uncomfortably close to other forms of behavioral addiction. Your brain doesn't really care where dopamine comes from. It just knows that it wants another hit. For people who aren't into sports, their dopamine systems simply don't light up from watching other people compete. And some of that may be baked in from birth. Research out of the University of New York suggests that differences in dopamine receptor genes can help predict how much a person gets into competitive spectator activities. Let that sink in. Your total lack of concern over whether the Celtics win or lose might actually be written into your DNA. But there's more to it than that. Sports fans also fall into something psychologists call basking in reflected glory. When their team wins, they say, we won. When their team loses, they say they lost. Hear that switch? People who don't fixate on sports are less likely to play that mental game. They tend to have a steadier sense of who they are. They don't need outside wins to feel like they're doing well. Their confidence stays more even, and it doesn't hang on things that they can't control. Now, before anyone gets fired up, I'm not saying one group is better than the other. I'm just saying there are real psychological differences, and they're pretty interesting. Here's where it starts to sound a little backwards. Sports fans often score higher on certain measures of empathy. They practice caring deeply about other people's struggles, even when those people are strangers in matching jerseys. So why don't non-sports folks feel that same pull? It comes down to where empathy gets spent. Everybody has only so much emotional energy to give. People who aren't into sports often pour that care into other areas. Social causes, close relationships, creative work, big ideas, personal growth. A study from 2020 found that people with low interest in sports scored much higher in openness. And in their love of art and beauty, they get their emotional highs from music, art, nature, and ideas. Their brains are chasing the same feelings. Reward, meaning a connection, a sense of something bigger. They're just finding it in different places. And let's be real about something else. For some folks, not caring about sports is actually a way to protect themselves. Maybe gym class was rough on them. Maybe sports culture made them feel shut out. Maybe they're turned off by the aggressive competitiveness that can come with fandom. Or maybe they've always wondered, why grown adults yell at a TV over a ball? Your lack of interest might have a story behind it. Or maybe you just think it's dull. Either way, that's fair. And here's the part. That explains why fans and non-fans often talk past each other. It comes down to where you find meaning. Sports fans find meaning in stories. The underdog rising up, the big comeback, the long-running dynasty, the heated rivalries. It pulls people in because it's messy, real-life drama where the outcome isn't set and the stakes feel real. People who don't care about sports often look at all that randomness and think it doesn't mean much. They quietly ask themselves, why would I pour my feelings into something I can't control, done by people I don't know, in a game that doesn't change my real life at all? And honestly, they're not wrong. But sports fans aren't wrong either. It's simply two different ways of chasing story and meaning. One side finds a powerful story in a championship run. The other finds it in a book, a relationship, a creative build, or a scientific breakthrough. Researchers call this the difference between parasocial investment and direct engagement. Sports fans form one-way emotional bonds with teams and players. People who aren't into sports would rather spend their emotional energy where it can flow both ways, where their care can actually affect what happens, where they're involved instead of just watching. Neither approach is better. They're simply two paths through the same human experience. A psychologist named Mihaly, who studied what he called optimal experience, found that flow states, those moments when you're fully locked in, can come from countless activities. For some people, that's watching sports. For others, it's almost anything else. And here's something that really stands out. People who don't fixate on sports often say they feel more present in their own lives. They aren't spending 3 hours every Sunday riding someone else's struggle. They're living their own. There's something quietly bold about that. So what does all this really mean? If you don't care about sports, you're not missing some core human experience. You're just wired differently. Your reward system, your tribal pull, the way you aim your empathy, all of it runs on a different setting. And that's completely fine. So next time someone asks, did you see the game? And you honestly couldn't care less. Remember this, you're not broken. You're not dull.